Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. And we will be doing a group-by-group preview of Gold Cup 2021. And within that, a team-by-team overview as well. So we're going to start today with part one, where we will begin with an overview of Group A, giving a brief introduction of the teams and countries, including looking at the location and size of each country.
Right, and then part two, we'll do a team-by-team overview. We'll be looking at their long history, their recent history, a brief view of World Cup, and a slightly longer view of their Concacaf history, and then a qualifying record and a very brief overview of their players.
And then we'll wrap up with part three, which will be a discussion of their prospects and our predictions, looking at the rankings, their head-to-head records, and then again, our discussion of the prospects for each team.
Right. So please check out our preliminary podcast. We've recorded some overriding information that we think it's redundant to repeat every time. So that includes kind of an introduction of ourselves and of the podcast, a history of the CONCACAF regional tournament, and some of the changes it's gone through over the years, and then an introduction to some other relevant tournaments that CONCACAF is involved with. And finally, Connor gives a discussion of the FIFA and ELO rankings.
Right. And if you're looking to find us on the internet, you can search Soccer Files or Soccer Files Canada. That's Soccer Files with a PH. You can also search International Soccer Preview or International Soccer Podcast. And you can also check out our Euro Cup 2020 preview, as well as our preview of the 2021 Copa America.
Yeah, well, they're almost outdated by now, but you can go back and check and see if we said anything sensible. I, Connor, am wearing a Mexico shirt, not particularly because I have allegiance to Mexico, but mostly because I have the shirt.
Very nice. I don't have any shirt worth mentioning here, but I do like your Mexico shirt for Group A.
Right, we got to get our Canada shirts in order.
That's right.
Right. Okay, well, let's begin with part one. Over to you, Connor, for that.
Sure, so just an overview of Group A. So Mexico, they are the defending Gold Cup champions and are the most successful team in the history of the tournament, having been crowned champions 11 times.
Right. The next team is El Salvador. They actually hosted the inaugural CONCACAF Championship in 1963, where they were runners-up. They were also runners-up in 1981, but have not made it to the Final Four in the post-1991 Gold Cup era.
Third is Curacao. They have qualified for their third straight Gold Cup and are looking to improve on 2019's quarterfinal appearance.
Right, and the late addition was Trinidad and Tobago. They're competing in their 17th CONCACAF Championship / Gold Cup, and they finished inside the top three on 3 occasions, but they have never won.
That's right. All right, I'll go through a bit of a discussion of the size and population of each country. So first is Mexico, the largest country in Central America. They have a population of 126 million people, which is 11th overall in the world. Moving on to El Salvador. They are the smallest country in Central America in terms of size, just 21,000 square kilometers. They have a population of 6.8 million people, which is ranked 107th in the world, or kind of roughly half in terms of all countries globally.
Okay, what about Curacao?
Curacao is a small island country just north of Venezuela in the Caribbean. They have a population of just 154,000 people. They are the second smallest team in the tournament after Grenada in terms of population, and at 176th are one of the smallest countries or territories in the world.
That's right, and I'm going to jump in here with a little history saying they were formerly known as the Netherlands Antilles, But the country has changed. I don't know if it's one island or those two islands, Connor. Do you know?
I believe it's the two islands, and they have two
Right.
stars on their flags to correspond to that.
Yeah, two stars on their flag. But interestingly, when they were the Netherlands Antilles, they were those two islands plus three smaller islands way far north. Very interesting. Well, that's all I have to say, really.
Yeah, a bit of a grouping of all the colonies or the Dutch colonies in the Caribbean, but that grouping known as the Netherlands Antilles is kind of broken apart into separate countries now, or territories, right. I should say.
Okay, great. So let's move on to Trinidad and Tobago.
So Trinidad and Tobago, like Curacao, they're just north of Venezuela in the South Caribbean, though quite far apart. Trinidad and Tobago being quite a bit further east than Curacao. They have 1.4 million people. That's 150th in the world out of about just over 200 countries. And they're the second smallest country ever to qualify for the World Cup after Iceland.
Great. So listening to that information may be a bit bewildering. So we've put together just this little comparison and maybe look at it from biggest to smallest. Do you mind doing that, Connor?
Yeah. So Mexico, as we said, the biggest country with 126 million people. Next in the group is El Salvador at just 6.8. So a huge discrepancy. Trinidad and Tobago has 1.4 million people. So about 100th the population of Mexico, and Curacao with 150,000 people are about 1,000th the population of Mexico. So we've got some disparity here in Group A.
Okay, well, let's move on to Mexico, and it's kind of hard to keep their history brief because it's such a long and detailed history. So we have to kind of, without going into too much detail, have to spend a bit more time probably on Mexico than we will on the other teams. But let's begin with Mexico with a nickname. Connor, do we have a nickname?
Yes, we do. Mexico are known as El Tri, which is the tricolor, or the three colors representing their flag. And that's a very common nickname for them. I think you hear them refer to that quite a bit.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that. Okay, well, let's take a look at their tournament participation and an overview of their major achievements. Mexico is a senior team in the world, having participated in every World Cup since 1930, except for 1938, when they withdrew, and 1990, when they were disqualified. The regional tournament, including Central and North American teams as well as Caribbean teams, was known as the Concacaf Championship from 1963 to 1989, and from 1974 it acted as the qualifying tournament for World Cups, which lasted until 1990. They participated in that from the beginning, but they didn't enter in 1985, and they were banned in 1989. The regional tournament then became known as the Gold Cup, and in 1991, and they've never failed to participate in that. They were also invited guests for every Copa America from 1993 to 2016, but that seems to be a thing of the past now. And also a thing of the past is the Confederations Cup. As regular champions of the Concacaf regional tournament, they were the representatives of the region 6 times from 1997 to 2017. They failed only to qualify twice in 2003 and 2009. So that's a bit of an overview, and now we'll take a look at their World Cup history.
Yeah, great overview there of Mexico and all the tournaments they participated in. In terms of the World Cup, Mexico is a regular qualifier for the World Cup. They've only failed to qualify on 3 occasions. In 1934, where they actually traveled overseas to Italy only to play a single qualifying match, which they lost, in 1974 and in 1982. As mentioned above, they were disqualified in 1990, the reason being that they fielded overage players for a youth tournament, actually forging birth certificates of certain players. In the early years, they were invariably knocked out in the group stage. They reached the quarterfinals in 1970 and then again in 1986, aided by being the host in both occasions. In between that, they had their worst spell, failing to qualify twice and getting knocked out in the group stage in 1986. But after being disqualified in 1990, they reached the round of 16 in 1994, and that has been their finishing place in every cup since. So that's 7 straight, so pretty remarkable.
Yeah, you can't blame them for being inconsistent on that count. Let's go to the regional cup here, the Concacaf Championship until 1989, and the Gold Cup from 1991 onward. Mexico's always been a power in the region, winning the title 11 out of 25 times. Though they've always been near the top, they did not win the region as much as would be expected, having done so only 3 in 11 times until 1993. The regional tournament, again, that's the CONCACAF Championship from 1963 to 89, began kind of inauspiciously, getting knocked out at the group stage. Despite beating Jamaica 8-0, they went on to tie Costa Rica and lost to, get this, Connor, Netherlands Antilles, now Curacao. Yeah. From the following version in 1965, however, they were a dominant team, although they won less than half the time. They won in 1965, but came second to Guatemala in 1967. We're not going to go through year by year, but the early history is kind of interesting here. 1969 was their worst performance. After beating Jamaica in the first game, they lost to Costa Rica and Guatemala and tied Netherlands Antilles and tied Trinidad and Tobago, both of whom they meet in this group. And they finished a humiliating 4th out of 6. They won in 1971, but finished 3rd behind host Haiti and Trinidad and Tobago in 1973, failing to qualify for the World Cup that year. That pattern repeated, winning all games in the title in 1977, but then finishing 3rd, this time behind Honduras and El Salvador in 1981, which also cost them a seat at the World Cup. Given that inconsistent record, being granted automatic qualification for the Gold Cup from 1991 onward seems a bit unfair. From 1973 to 89, their qualification group had actually been themselves the USA and Canada. They always made it through, but sometimes it was 2 of them. There were no main rivals for Mexico before the Gold Cup. Rather, it was individual countries kind of popping up and outdoing them here and there. But from 1990, it was the USA that became their biggest rival. The 2 have ruled the region since 1991, winning every Gold Cup between them, except for one, Connor.
That was Canada in 2000.
Yeah,
I still remember that.
Yeah, that was a great one for us. From 2000 to 2007, they won only one of the 5 tournaments, which was their longest dry spell. And as has been apparent throughout their history, it wasn't always the US, even in the modern region, but rather Canada, as we saw in 2000, but invited guests South Korea in 2003 and Colombia in 2005. It was Panama who knocked them out in 2013 and Jamaica in 2017. So they're not completely dominant in the region. In their rivalry with the USA, they have won more cups, and in recent times they've reasserted themselves as the dominant force, winning 4 of the last 6 titles. They've been involved in a lot of other things kind of outside of CONCACAF. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Connor?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Mexico have also participated in the Copa America from 1993 to 2016, and they do very well in that competition. Though they've never won, they finished in the top 3 for 5 of their first 7 tournaments, including 3 second-place finishes. In 2011, their U23 team played in the competition, which might become the norm given new FIFA rules on participating in competitions outside of one's region. They did not participate, though, in 2019 or 2021, and there is talk that they will never participate again, along with some talk of the two regions combining. So yeah, a pretty good history in the Copa America, but that does seem to be in the past now. And then in terms of Confederations Cup, it's worth mentioning just because they've competed in 6 of the 8 Confederation Cups that were held. They were winners in 1999 when they hosted, and then came fourth in 2005 and 2017. 3 times they failed to pass the group stage, though, perhaps hinting at the relative weakness of the CONCACAF region overall.
Yeah, good point there at the end. So, yeah, let's just summarize Mexico. Like, despite being a respectable team in all competitions, they show some inconsistency. Their early period in the CONCACAF region has been mentioned above. Though they usually earn good results, the process is sometimes inconsistent, which upsets their demanding fans. And they're very strong at home, but they do drop points on the road, which makes some qualifications a bit more arduous and hazardous than they should be. Recently, however, they've become more inconsistent, but as you say, there's a bit of a question as to their strength on the world stage, even though they are kind of the top CONCACAF team.
Yeah, they've become more consistent, like you said, over recent years. I think you might have said inconsistent, but
sorry,
consistent.
No, they've become more consistent. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to their recent history. The CONCACAF Nations League represents a change for them and everyone in CONCACAF. Do you want to take us through Mexico's participation in that?
Right. So yeah, the CONCACAF Nations League was a new system that came into being in 2019, and that's going to act as qualification for future regional cups like the Gold Cup. In the 2019-20 season, they were seeded into League A based on CONCACAF's ranking system, League A being the top tier. They were drawn with Panama and Bermuda and won all 4 games. This took them into the finals of the Nations League, which were scheduled for 2020, but eventually took place in June 2021 due to COVID-19. There they beat Costa Rica on penalties in the semifinal, but lost to the USA in extra time of the final. So the next competition is for the 2022-23 season, and that will begin in May of 2022, and they will once again be in League A.
Right, and maybe we should point out that that those finals are a bit quirky. It's only the League A teams, the winners of League A, that kind of play a little mini tournament for the championship of the region.
Yeah, that's right. Just really for it's a set 1-leg semifinal and final, just for the purpose of declaring a winner, an overall winner.
Yeah. Okay, and let's move on to the 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign. That's my part. Well, this is pretty easy. They received a bye to the final round, and that was actually in the 2018-19 CONCACAF Nations League. That was based on the 6 teams who made the final round of the World Cup qualifying, known as the Hex. They received a bye into League A and into the Gold Cup 2019. In this case, it was a little different. It was just by dint of being ranked in the top 5 CONCACAF teams, according to the July 2020 FIFA rankings. So a lot of people considered that quite unfair, as did I. How about you, Connor?
Yeah, I agree. Mexico kind of dropped, along with 4 other teams, into the final CONCACAF round, known as the Octagon now, or the OCA. But that's the 3rd round of World Cup qualifying. So they got to skip basically rounds 1 and 2 and have just been placed in the final round. So, it's perhaps seen by some, including us, as perhaps undermining the meritocracy of World Cup qualifying just by placing them into the final round.
Yeah, well put. Well, because they don't have any games in 2022 World Cup qualifying, we kind of can't look at their scorers. But you've been looking at the squad for the upcoming tournament. Do you want to just give us a little overview of the players there?
Yeah, looking at Mexico squad, they just have so many players to choose from. So different players are in and out all the time. In their current 23-man squad, 14 of them currently play in Mexico. Mexico, of course, is quite a strong domestic league. A further 3 play in the United States, and there's 6 in Europe. So some of the ones that play in Europe, some of their strikers and probably some of their key players are Jesus Corona, who plays for Porto, and Irving Lozano, who plays in Napoli. So they both will be kind of the main goal threats. And as well as Hector Herrera, who's a midfielder with Atletico Madrid, who just came off winning Spanish La Liga. So 3 big name players there that all play with really big teams in Europe.
Right. Yeah. So they will definitely be a powerhouse in the tournament, but we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the podcast. Are we ready to move on to El Salvador?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's take a look at a bit of an overview of their tournament participation and major achievements. They're actually a much older team than most people will think. They first entered the World Cup in 1938, but like many teams in the Americas, they withdrew when the Cup was held in Europe for a second straight time, rather than alternating between Europe and the Americas as promised. They were also reportedly invited to the 1950 World Cup in Brazil, but they withdrew. Then they didn't enter until 1970, but they have participated consistently after that. In regional competition, they were there from the first edition in 1963. Participation was patchy in the early years, though. They didn't enter the third edition in 1967, were disqualified in 1969, and withdrew in 1971. However, their participation, like the World Cup, has been consistent since that time. Their local tournament for Gold Cup qualification is the Concacaf Nations Cup. From 2011, that became known as the Copa Centroamericana, but we will probably make mistakes and switch back and forth a bit. I'm going to go with the Concacaf Nations Cup. That is the 7 Central American teams that make up a kind of a zone in CONCACAF. They entered every version from 1991 to 2017. It's finished now because the Nations League has taken over. And finally, they were eligible for the 2016 Copa America Centenario edition, the 100th edition of South America's Copa America, but they failed to qualify for that. Let's go back to take a closer look at their World Cup performance.
So El Salvador has qualified for 2 World Cups in 1970 and 1982. While this is by far their best achievement, they're perhaps not as impressive as they seem. They did do well at regional levels to get there, but their poor showings at the World Cups, humiliating in fact, almost made it not worth it for them. Nowadays, they do well to reach the final round of qualification, or the Hex, something they achieved throughout the 1990s, but only once since in 2010. The most noteworthy event was in World Cup 2014 qualification, where they were charged in a match-fixing scandal that led to lifetime bans for 14 major players, as well as lesser bans for many others.
Wow. All right, well, let's take a look at their regional performance here. They fared well early on, actually. They earned 2nd and 4th place, respectively, in the first 2 editions, 1963 and 1965. And they also had a good run around 1980, coming 3rd in 1977 and then 2nd in 1981. They did poorly after that, though, with a really chaotic tournament in 1989. That was the last the last CONCACAF championship. They didn't play their first match until the other teams had played 3 or 4 of theirs, and then they had their last 2 matches cancelled because they were kind of meaningless. That poor performance continued into the early years of the Gold Cup, either not qualifying or reaching the Cup but getting knocked out at the group stage. They earned only a single win over Trinidad and Tobago from 1991 until 2002. But 2002 and 2003 saw them pass the group stage, though both of those were based on a single win in the three-team group where the top two teams passed. So pretty easy to get through the group stage there. They lost heavily in the quarterfinals, though, in 2002 and 3 to USA and Costa Rica, respectively. So still quite weak. 2005 marks the last edition where they failed to qualify. But since then, they have fallen either at the group stage or at the quarterfinal stage. If we take a quick look at the local or the zone, the Central American zone competition, they almost invariably finished third or fourth, though 2003 was their last third place finish before 2013. So kind of weak, kind of a middling team among the Central American teams. And now the local competition has been replaced by the Concacaf Nations League. And Connor, I think you're going to take us through that a little bit later.
Right.
Or right now, in fact.
Sure, I'll go through it now. So they were involved in an initial qualifying round where teams were placed in leagues A to C. It was the same round that acted as qualification for the 2019 Gold Cup. The top 6 teams in this overall table were given automatic entry based on their regional ranking. So that would be the teams participating in the Hex. They did not participate in this qualifying round for the Nations League. And then in the overall table, only the top 6 teams would qualify for League A. So they finished 10th, which was not enough to qualify for League A, but it was enough to get them into the 2019 Gold Cup. So in the 2019-2020 version of the Nations League, they were placed in League B, and there they won the group over Montserrat, Dominican Republic, and St. Lucia, winning all of their games except for a loss in Dominican Republic. So based on that, they earned promotion to League A for the next season, which will take place in 2022-23.
All right, great. And just to clear up some possible confusion, League A is made up of groups of 3 teams, and League B is made up of groups of 4 teams, and then League C is a bit of both. Let's take a look at their World Cup qualifying campaign. Unlike Mexico, they have gone through rounds 1 and 2, and they were quite convincing in round 1, but troubled by Montserrat, who used to be a really weak team, but who are coming on lately, and particularly troubling to El Salvador. You see, they tied them here, and El Salvador actually needed... El Salvador scored at 4 minutes into the game, but then Montserrat stole a tie with a goal at 89. Anyway, they finished first in that group ahead of Montserrat, and they went on to round 2 of 3, where they played St. Kitts and Nevis in a knockout, and basically they won both games and therefore qualified for the OCA, the 8-group final round. Sorry, the 8-team final round. And there we have it. And you're gonna... Oh, sorry. Do you have anything to add?
No, I'll discuss a bit of their players and some of those goal scorers in 2022 World Cup qualifying.
Super.
Their main goal scorer was David Rugamis. He scored 8 goals for them in qualifying in their over their 6 matches. He scored 10 goals in 17 appearances for the national side and is their kind of leading goal threat going into this tournament. Most of their players play domestically in the El Salvadorian League, though there are some who play in the U.S. Really, it's a relatively inexperienced squad that's coming into this tournament with not a lot of goals in their side. Probably their most prolific goal scorer Nelson Bonilla. He was not in the squad. I'm not entirely sure why. But yeah, they have a couple players with relatively few caps and goals making up the majority of their side.
Right, and I'm not confident about this, but I think I've seen Nelson Bonilla's name recently, so he may still be around. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I believe he's still active for the team, but for some reason is not in this squad.
Oh, he's not in the 2021 squad.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to get the lowdown on that. Okay, great. Thanks for that, Connor. And I think we're ready to move on to Curacao.
All right.
Okay, and how about a nickname for this team?
I couldn't find one. I couldn't find a nickname for Curacao. Not every team has one. Curacao also a bit newer under their current name, but I was unable to find a nickname for them.
Right, I don't know of one either. Anyway, let's take a look at their tournament participation and major achievements. So they were known as the Netherlands Antilles from 1948 to 2010. Interestingly, they did actually play some games as Curacao before that. But anyway, they are a very old team, having played their first international in 1926. They first entered the World Cup in 1954 and the Concacaf Championship from its beginning in 1963. They've never missed a World Cup qualification, but they have been inconsistent in regional competition, withdrawing from the Concacaf Championship in 1971 and either not entering or withdrawing from several Gold Cups. Not so much from the Gold Cup, but they were withdrawing from the Caribbean Cup, which was the qualifier for the Gold Cup. And they have only entered the World Cup qualification consistently since 2007. But I think they'll be regular entrants now. Let's go back to their World Cup record. It's pretty impressive in terms of consistency, at least, Connor.
Yeah, in general, they were stronger in the past and in modern times, but they have come back to form since 2007. In the World Cup, they reached the final round of qualification twice. That was in 1962 and 1974. Though they finished just 2 points away from the World Cup in 1962. A closer analysis shows that they were not really close in either of those. That's 1962 or 1974. Despite some impressive individual results and often getting to the second round of qualification, they've never come close since. Although their improved recent form is reflected in knocking out Cuba to reach round 3 in 2018 World Cup qualifying, round 3 of 5.
Right. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at their history in the region. As Connor said, for the World Cup, they were stronger in earlier years. They were really a force to be reckoned with, actually, in the early years of this CONCACAF championship. In 1963, they reached the final round by twice beating the respectable Haiti and finishing second in the group ahead of Mexico and Jamaica, beating both of them. They finished third or fourth in the final round robin, beating and finishing ahead of Honduras, but losing to and finishing behind Costa Rica and El Salvador. So that's, I'm going into detail because that's their best performance, pretty much. In 1969, they equaled that. Anyway, but in between, it was fifth place in 1965, and they didn't qualify in 1967. But as I said, 1969 was another third place finish. They tied Mexico, and they finished ahead of and beat most of the top Caribbean teams, all of the top Caribbean teams. But they fell to the Central American teams, third place behind Costa Rica and Guatemala. That was the end of their strong period, though. And despite earning some good individual results, as in the World Cup, they never reached the round robin again. They didn't qualify after that until reaching the Gold Cup in 2017. And then they went one step further in 2019 by passing the group stage, where they were knocked out in the quarterfinals by the US. the USA. But if we take a look at the Caribbean Cup, we can see really why there was such a dry period between 1969 and 2017. And the reason is they basically struggled in the Caribbean Cup. They did really poorly, making only 3 appearances from its start in 1989 to 2014. Then they came out of nowhere to win the final edition of the Caribbean Cup in 2017. That was quite striking, hey, Connor?
Yeah, it was. And it kind of has been reflected in some other good performances in the Gold Cup at that time. But yeah, based on history, it was kind of out of the blue.
Yeah, apparently what they've done, like a lot of Caribbean countries, is they've kind of scoured the records to see which European players have kind of a connection or descent. And it's really surprising how many of them do. I think we'll take a look at it with Martinique or Guadeloupe a bit later on. But some of the players, big names in France and stuff, they do have connections to the team. One of them is Patrick Kluivert, who is now coaching Curacao. And that's the reason for the improvement of these teams and teams like Montserrat, who I mentioned in passing a little bit before. They're finding these players, and if they can't play for say England or Netherlands, then they join their Caribbean teams. Sorry if I lingered on that.
No, that's interesting. And I think even currently, Patrick Van Aanholt was another player with links to Curacao who's playing for the Dutch national team.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, generally it's like if they don't make the Dutch national team, then they have this kind of fallback option, which some of them take.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the recent history, and Connor's going to take us through the Nations League.
Right. So the initial phase of the Nations League, as we've talked about in 2018-19, was a 4-game round robin that served as both Gold Cup qualification for the 2019 Gold Cup, as well as placement for the 2019-20 Nations League. 6th place or better would see them both in League A and the 2019 Gold Cup, and they finished 4th with fairly easy opponents in Grenada, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guadeloupe, and Antigua and Barbuda. They won 3 of those games and just lost the last one to Antigua. In 2019-20 Nations League A play, they bested Haiti and tied Costa Rica away to finish 2nd. So they will remain in League A for the 2022-23 season.
Wow, good for them. They're becoming a bit of a second-tier team in the region. Let's see how they fared in World Cup qualification. They also went through the first 2 rounds and had little trouble in the first round, quite impressively beating Guatemala, who is a fairly good team. They beat them, interestingly, tied on points, tied on goal difference, and they went through by dint of scoring 1 more goal than Guatemala did. The 2 tied in the last game, which was supposed to separate them, but there was no separating them. But Curacao came through and moved on to the next round. Unfortunately, they lost to Panama in the next round, so still not quite strong enough to make it into the final round of qualification, although there is a bright future for them.
Yeah, absolutely. A very good performance, and like you said, kind of puts them in that second tier of Concacaf teams.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at some of the players who are getting them there.
Yeah, key players are our brothers, Leandro Bacuna.
For Cardiff!
For Cardiff, all right, yeah. Player we're used to supporting.
Yeah.
And his younger brother, Juninho Bacuna, who plays for Huddersfield. So both of them play in the English Championship. They actually have quite a few players overseas, with several in the Dutch leagues. Not always in the top tier, but further down. But like I said, overseas players does give them some good experience. Um, their top goal scorer in the team right now with 12 goals and 22 appearances is Rangelo Janga. He plays in the Dutch second tier with a team called NEC.
Yeah, Nijmegen.
That's right.
Oh yeah, yeah. We did get a look at some of these players in the 2017 and 19 Gold Cup. So these names are kind of becoming a bit more familiar to me. They have quite a few good players there.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of overseas players and goal scoring was remarkably spread out in 2022 World Cup qualifying. They had about 10 different players on the score sheet, so that can be a good sign. It means they're not quite dependent on one player, but actually have a couple players in the team that they can rely on. And I think that has lifted the whole team, especially since 2017, where they've had those 2 Gold Cup appearances and performed well in the Nations League and 2022 World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, great. Very interesting. Well, they are an exciting team, and it'll be interesting to see. And we probably will see more of them because with the tournament expanding to 16 teams, I think they could be regulars.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, let's move on to our final team. They just made it in a couple of days ago through a playoff, and it's Trinidad and Tobago. I don't think they have a nickname either, do they, Connor?
They do, in fact. The Soca Warriors.
The Soca Warriors, yeah.
In my mind, that's one of the best nicknames in all of football.
I like it too. It's great. And I think that one is very regularly used.
Yeah.
Great. Let's take a look at their tournament participation and major achievements. They first entered World Cup qualification in 1966, and they've participated consistently since. Their greatest achievement was reaching the 2006 World Cup, which was their only successful qualification. Their participation record in Concacaf in the Regional Cup is similar. They entered in 1967, and they've never failed to complete qualification. They finished second in 1973, and they have 4 top 4 finishes. They're also one of the main forces in the Caribbean zone. And they won the Caribbean Cup 8 out of its 19 editions. 8 out of 19.
Wow, so impressive.
Yeah, they really ruled that cup. Although that cup is now defunct and they have to qualify through the Nations League. Let's go back to the World Cup and take a slightly closer look.
Yeah, their qualification for the 2006 World Cup, their biggest success by far, was a surprise but not a shock. It was during a period where they had reached the final round of qualification 3 times in a row, something they've only ever done twice before. In 1974, where they beat Mexico 4-0 and finished ahead of them, but just 1 play short of reaching the World Cup when Haiti took the position. And in 1994, where they also fell 2 points and 1 play shy. But it was a surprise given they finished last in the final stages of 2002 and 2010, no less than 10 points out of contention. In that 2006 World Cup, they performed well too. They certainly didn't disgrace themselves. They tied Sweden 0-0 in their opener and then lost to England 2-0, but it took until the 83rd minute for England to break them down. A really heartbreaking defeat for Trinidad, who then lost their final game to Paraguay. In 2014 World Cup qualifying, they suffered the embarrassment of being knocked out in the preliminaries by Guyana, but they reached the final round again in 2018, where they played a key role in knocking the USA out of contention.
Yes, they did. I think they even sent a B team to that game because they were out of contention, and the B team beat USA and knocked them out of qualifying. I'm sure USA will want to get revenge time after time over that.
That was quite a famous win. You're absolutely right. Several key players missing, and it was one of the final games too. And they pulled just a glorious shock. But even more ironic was that it was a meaningless game for them. where it meant everything for the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I cry for Americans, but I gotta say, it is amusing. Are we being rotten, Connor?
I don't think so. We know where our allegiances lie. I like the U.S. I'll be honest, but yes,
Yeah.
you have to love a good underdog story, and that was a truly great one.
Well put. Okay, I gotta get a hold of myself before we move on to the regional stuff. At the regional level, they've had some impressive success in the past. They came fourth in their first entry in 1967, and in 1973, they took second place behind Haiti but ahead of Mexico. They finished third in 1989 and reached the semifinals in 2000, where they were knocked out by the eventual winners of the 2000 Gold Cup. Connor?
Canada.
Yeah. They might have done well in 2007 following their World Cup qualification, but because players hadn't been paid their World Cup bonuses, they boycotted the 2007 Gold Cup, which forced the country's football association to send a B team. So we'll never know really how they might have done. Their next successful period was reaching the quarterfinals twice in a row in 2013 and 2015. But apart from these 6 successes, which I've described, they either failed to qualify, which was 7 times, or were knocked out in the group stage effectively 10 times. And that holds true in recent times. They failed to qualify in 2017 and got knocked out at the group stage in 2019. Given that they didn't qualify in 2017, it seemed really unfair for them to receive automatic passage in 2019, which, as we've seen, was based on them reaching the hex for the 2018 World Cup qualification. They also received automatic passage into League A of the Concacaf Nations League, which Connor will talk about soon. Well, you can talk about the Nations League Cup, so I'll leave that for you. I'll just take a quick look at the Caribbean Cup because this is very interesting. I've said they are a powerhouse, but really it's more like they were. They and Jamaica were virtually the only Caribbean countries capable of hosting the Cup before 2008. And get this, Connor, they won it 8 out of the first 12 times.
Wow.
But never since then. So they won it 8 out of 12 times till 2001, and then they didn't win it after that. Yes, and it was a shock even further when they didn't pass the group stage in 2008 and again in 2010. Second place finishes in 2012 and 2014 seemed to bring things back to normal, but in 2017, they kind of outdid themselves by not even qualifying for the Cup. So that's a kind of a poor descent into weakness for them, Connor. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I find it particularly interesting that at the time they qualified for the 2006 World Cup, that they weren't able to replicate that success in the Caribbean Cup when they had dominated for so long, as you had mentioned. And yeah, recent performances since the World Cup have gone completely south for them, basically, with some of their poorest performances since the tournament started.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. I was going to kind of summarize their history, but I think we should just move right on to their recent history because that kind of summarizes it in itself. Do you want to take us through their CONCACAF Nations League performance?
Right. So they didn't participate in the first Nations League, which was just a qualifying round, due to their involvement in the Hex. And then that also put them automatically into League A, or the top tier, for 2019-20. There, however, they lost twice to Honduras and then tied Martinique twice. They finished a point behind Martinique, who themselves managed to get a draw against Honduras. So they finished in last place and have been relegated to League B, into that second tier of the Nations League.
Right, and those teams that were relegated from League A didn't get qualification for the 2021 Cup. Instead, they went through a playoff, right?
That's right. So they were one of three teams in the Gold Cup that had to qualify through a playoff. Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, it happened just recently, just a couple of days ago. The first game, I think, was July 2nd or 3rd, and they met Montserrat. And even though Montserrat has been improving quite a bit, they didn't look very good here. Trinidad and Tobago beat them 6-1 for convincing passage to the second round. In the second round, they met French Guiana, and they tied them 1-1 in regular time, so it went to penalties. Everyone scored their penalties up until the eighth penalty. The French Guiana was shooting second, and Trinidad and Tobago scored their eighth penalty, and French Guiana missed theirs. So sadly, French Guiana was out, and Trinidad and Tobago is in. That's why they're here.
By the skin of their teeth.
Yeah. And maybe we can get a bit more insight by looking at their 2022 World Cup qualifying performance. No, we cannot, because they haven't played any games. They received a bye in rounds 1 and 2. Strangely, I can't believe it, they were ranked in the top 5 Concacaf teams, according to the July 2020 FIFA rankings. Oh, hang on, am I right here? I think they did play.
You're right. They did play. Yes, and actually they have played, and now their tournament is over. They did play in the qualifying round, not getting a bye like some other teams, though, as they of course were in the Hex in 2018. But they will not make it to the Octagon in 2022. So, yeah, I can just take us through that qualifying very briefly. So they were in a 5-team group, and Trinidad and Tobago finished second behind St. Kitts and Nevis. Only the top team out of the 5 advanced to the next round. So Trinidad crashed out. They won their home games against St. Kitts and Nevis and Guyana, but they finished second by virtue of poor away results. Poor, perhaps an understatement.
I'll say.
Yeah, they tied 1-1 in Puerto Rico and tied 0-0 against the Bahamas, a team ranked 201st in the world.
And really, Puerto Rico is, they do kind of step up and have a good game once in a while. But those are 2 of the very weakest teams in CONCACAF and in the world.
So, yeah, even though they may be in a weak period, a hugely disappointing for them to not advance in that manner.
Yeah, I mean, they disappointingly lost to Guyana in 2014, but this is actually far more shameful, losing to those weak teams. And yeah, they did beat St. Kitts and Nevis, but didn't finish first in the group. So really shocking, to be honest. Anyway, nice cover there, Connor. Sorry I didn't get the information right.
Sure.
Yeah. But you were going to talk a little bit about their players before we move on to discussing the prospects of each team.
Yeah, looking at their players and perhaps the clubs they're with has kind of shown how far they've declined from the 2006 team, where they featured a lot of household names to particularly the fans of English soccer. Currently, a number of their players play in Trinidad and Tobago, which has kind of always been the case, but they also have several players who are unattached or without clubs, and they currently have no players playing in the UK. Previously, names like Kenwyn Jones, Russell Labadie, further back, Dwight York. They've always had a couple kind of star players, but that's not the case now. Their key player is probably Kevin Molina. He's a 31-year-old midfielder and probably their main goal threat. He plays in Major League Soccer with Columbus Crew.
Right, so it's kind of looking grim all around. I actually like Trinidad and Tobago quite a bit, but they've done so poorly lately. Um, it's a bit depressing, really. Okay,
Very
well, let's move on to the prospects part of the tournament, and we're going to begin by looking at the rankings of the four teams. Do you want to take us through that, Connor?
Sure. So Mexico are currently 11th in the FIFA rankings and 14th in ELO. They've basically been between 10th and 20th in both systems for most of the past decade. Their most recent high was 9th in FIFA rankings in December 2020. Going a little bit further back, they reached 4th in FIFA rankings in May 2006. Their high point in ELO came in December 2012 when they were 8th. But like I said, since 2010, the vast majority of the time they've bounced somewhere between 10th and 20th, which, being a team that often gets to the quarterfinals in the World Cup and no further seems to be an accurate reflection.
Yeah, actually, the round of 16 and no further, so that fits right in between 10th and 20th.
Right, thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Let's move on to El Salvador.
El Salvador are 69th according to FIFA rankings and 81st according to ELO. They've risen quite a bit in the past 5 years, rising from 137th and 111th, respectively, that being in December 2016. Over the past 10 years, again, generally, they've been between 70th and 100th in FIFA and between 80th and 100th in ELO. Their most recent high point came in June 2020 when they were as high as 55th and 71st. But that was a bit of an anomaly. They tend to be a little bit lower, and they're 69th and 81st rankings now. Kind of a bit of an upswing compared to recently.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised to hear that. I mean, my overall narrative for El Salvador is that they really haven't changed much over the years at all, haven't improved and haven't declined. I mean, even that scandal in 2014 where a lot of their players were banned didn't seem to shift the needle on them. So I'm not sure what's motivating this rise in their ranking. But for me, they're pretty much the same as always. Do you have an opinion on that?
I think sometimes when you look into the lower reaches of the rankings, including around that 100th mark, there's a lot more opportunities for mobility. A team can kind of rise quickly or fall quickly based on a couple results. So even though they've kind of bounced around, from 137th to 69th and spent a lot of time kind of in between, it's probably more a reflection of a couple individual good games in that period rather than to say that they've turned a corner or are really a significantly stronger team than they were previously.
Well put. Okay, I mean they did reach the finals of the World Cup qualifying, so as you say, maybe that's enough to move the needle. From say 100 up to 80. Great stuff. Let's take a look at Curacao.
Curacao are currently 76th according to FIFA and 99th in ELO. This is the first time they've ever cracked the top 100 in ELO, which is kind of exciting for them. But they have been in the top 100 in FIFA since December 2016. Again, talking to that recent rise that we've mentioned kind of over the past 5 years. However, get this, in December 2013, they were really in the doldrums. They were 178 and 188. That was as in Netherlands Antilles, but that's right near the bottom of the 200 or so teams in the FIFA rankings.
That's really funny. I think doldrums is an expression that comes from the Caribbean weather patterns. I was amused when you used that word.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I'm not dead sure about that. But anyway, I think one interesting thing you pointed out there is that their improvement registered in their FIFA ranking, which moves faster than their ELO ranking, which is kind of a longer term, slower growth kind of thing. It is shocking that they were below 180 at one point. I'm kind of glad to see them above 100 in ELO now.
Yeah, agreed. And you make some good points there too.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to Trinidad and Tobago, which traditionally have been a stronger team than Curacao. Let's see if that's still true.
Currently, it is not true. They are below Curacao in both ranking systems. They're 103rd in FIFA and 117th in ELO. So dipping below 100, really for the first time ever since the rankings were started in 1995. They dipped below 100 in 2019. So really disappointing for them. Their high point, unsurprisingly, coincided with their 2006 run when they were 47th and 57th. But perhaps surprising is even earlier in December 2000, they were 29th in FIFA rankings.
Wow.
So a pretty major achievement for such a small country. But those two are kind of exceptions. They spent a lot of time in that 70th to 100th zone that we described for Curacao, but they've dropped below 100 since, which is a reflection of their poor play in recent times.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that unlike Curacao, which we just mentioned, the ELO has been more reactive. They've kind of dropped faster in ELO than in FIFA rankings. So
Yeah,
kind of
that's
the
very
opposite. Yeah. Well, we've also kind of taken a look at where they stand in terms of the region. Do you want to do that, Connor, or do you want me to do that?
I'll go through it. So Mexico, unsurprisingly, are the top ranked CONCACAF team in both systems. El Salvador are sixth according to FIFA and the 10th best CONCACAF team according to ELO. Curacao are just below at 8th and 12th, so 2 places below in both systems. And then Trinidad are 11th and 13th in FIFA and ELO in the region. So where the teams are seated in the group reflects their regional rankings.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm a bit surprised by that. I thought Trinidad and Tobago would be still ahead of Curacao, based on their reaching the final round of the 2018 World Cup and stuff. But there's no doubt they've dropped off.
Great. I think you're going to have a look at the head-to-head now if you want to take us through that.
Yeah, that's right. I haven't included all of the games in the little graphic that I've got for our YouTube listeners, but I'm just going to kind of touch on some of the key games that they've played. So Mexico and El Salvador first met in 1965. Their first significant meeting was, believe it or not, in the 1970 World Cup group stage. So I'm not sure why they would have 2 CONCACAF members in the group stage, but Mexico was host and they won 4-0. They played many times in between, but we'll jump to 2011 where they played in the Gold Cup. Mexico won that 5-0, and they've played 5 times since then, and Mexico has won all of those games. So they have a record of 14 wins, no ties between the two teams, and 3 losses. So Mexico definitely on top of that head-to-head. Moving on to Curacao, they've played 7 times. We talked a little bit about the history in 1963 CONCACAF Championship, where Curacao actually beat them. But that was the only time they did beat Mexico. They've tied them twice otherwise. So the record is Mexico with 4 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss. Trinidad and Tobago and Mexico have met many times, 20 times. We're just talking about significant meetings here, like in competition. And to make a long story short, it's 13 wins, 4 ties, and 3 losses for Mexico. So they definitely dominate that. Their most significant meeting was probably in the 2013 Gold Cup quarterfinal, where Mexico won. And Mexico haven't lost to Trinidad and Tobago since 2006. That great year for for Trinidad and Tobago, where they actually beat Mexico in qualifying. Moving on to El Salvador and Curacao, that is pretty one-sided. El Salvador have won 9 and tied 1 and never lost. And they've met quite a bit recently. They've met 4 times since 2017. That is since the time Curacao has improved. But despite their improvement, they can't seem to get past El Salvador and have lost all 4 meetings, including 2 games in World Cup qualification and 1 game in the 2019 Gold Cup. Interestingly, El Salvador and Trinidad and Tobago have an equal record. That is, each of them have 2 wins, 3 ties, and 2 losses. They haven't played until 2013, but actually in the last few meetings since 2010, Trinidad and Tobago have gotten the better of them. But we'll see now that Trinidad and Tobago seem quite a bit weaker. El Salvador might take the lead in that head-to-head. And finally, and this is why I said I was a bit surprised that Trinidad and Tobago is rated below Curacao, is because they have a record of 4 wins, 3 ties, and only 1 loss to Curacao. That loss was in 1969. But again, they've only met once recently in the 2014 Caribbean Cup, which Trinidad and Tobago won. So again, matters might have changed to slant the head-to-head in Curaçao's favor there. Any comments on all of that, Connor?
No, very interesting history. I think just on the last one you mentioned, Trinidad and Curacao, they haven't met since Trinidad's decline and Curaçao's rise. So I think perhaps the head-to-head a little bit less relevant in that one, just because the situation has changed.
Yeah, it's absolutely, for sure. Okay, well, we were looking for odds for this presentation, but we couldn't find any odds that gave an overview of like who is likely to win the tournament or who is likely to win groups. All we could find was kind of odds for just individual matches. So too bad we couldn't get the odds for this. But let's move on to our discussion about the prospects of each team. Do you want to take that away, Connor?
Sure, I'll get us started. I mean, I think it's easy to say that Mexico are clear favorites and perhaps clear favorites to go 3 wins from 3. Other teams can put in good performances, but Mexico dominates most of these teams when they've met, and certainly recently. So I would expect Mexico to have few problems, and really their focus is likely to be on the later rounds of this tournament.
Yeah, I don't think they falter too much at the group stage. I mean, they may give up a tie at the most, possibly in the 3rd game, but it's hard to see anyone else finishing first. Yeah, go ahead.
And then, I think for 2nd place could be interesting. I see it more as a competition between El Salvador and Curacao, and NC Trinidad. Less likely to be involved in that, though could take a point off either team or even a victory, which would change things. My heart is somewhat with Curacao, just given their rise, and of course the link to Cardiff City through Leandro Bacuna.
What about Kenwyn Jones?
Kenwyn Jones, another former player, not on the Trinidad team, but you're right, another Islander with Cardiff City. Both have appeared in the Premier League for Cardiff.
Yeah.
But I do favor El Salvador. They have the better record against Curacao, and have played them recently, like you mentioned, 4 times since 2017, and they've won all of them without conceding a goal. So that points a little bit more convincingly to El Salvador, more likely to finish 2nd than Curacao. But Curacao,
I mean, that's a bit indicative of the Central American region always kind of being a bit stronger than the Caribbean region, and it's nice that we have the Nations Cup that we can compare them now, because in the past, you would get the winners from the Central American region. They'd be hard to compare with the Caribbean Cup until they reach the Gold Cup. So I think the Central American region do have a bit of a stronger history. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. More of a discussion point.
No, I do agree with you. I mean, Curacao have some impressive results, certainly among their Caribbean neighbors, and that includes winning the Caribbean Cup, the most recent and final version of it. But I do favor El Salvador and generally the Central American teams overall.
Yeah. El Salvador is, as we said, very consistent. Maybe not at a top level, but I think consistent enough for this level in terms of getting through the group. The other thing too is Curacao had a little bit of a waiver, not reaching the final round of the World Cup, so they're not quite there yet. Whereas El Salvador was quite convincing as far as that went. And by the same token, Trinidad and Tobago, I know their convincing win over Montserrat doesn't seem that much, but Montserrat has troubled El Salvador. They're troubling a lot of other teams, and a resounding 6-1 win over them in qualifying, maybe means that Trinidad and Tobago have it in them to pull out a good tournament here, or at least a good game or two.
Yeah, after a disappointing World Cup qualifying campaign, which saw them crash out as we described, the fact that they bounced back with a convincing win over Montserrat and then a victory over French Guiana, albeit in penalties, to reach this tournament, it does give some reason for optimism in that they're coming in better form, just going through that qualification process.
Yeah, and we saw they have a very proud history, not only in the Caribbean Cup, but reaching the World Cup and some successes in the Gold Cup. So, I think they won't be satisfied with their growing weakness, and will certainly want to kind of get back on track.
Agreed.
This is all very interesting, Connor, but we're running out of time, so give it to me straight. How is this group going to end?
This group is going to finish Mexico in first, El Salvador second, Curacao third, and Trinidad fourth. So just like it's drawn up in the seedings. Do you agree?
I do agree. I do see some room for movement among the bottom three. So I wouldn't be shocked if El Salvador didn't come second. I wouldn't be shocked if Trinidad and Tobago did better than El Salvador, but than Curacao. But on the outset, I agree with you that I see it finishing kind of the default finish that I see is the order you described. Let's just take a moment, though, to look at these teams' overall chances in the tournament. Is Mexico going to win it, Connor?
They're the top-ranked team in the region, so you always have to put them in that conversation. I see the U.S. as kind of improving a little bit, and that was maybe reflected in their Nations League victory over Mexico. But I would say Mexico have a good chance, and their outcome or their goal is always the same. I think going into the Gold Cup, which is kind of anything less than victory is considered an underachievement.
That's right. Yeah, I think definitely. They don't always reach the final. Sometimes a strong team like Panama or Jamaica, kind of a team performing a bit above themselves, come. Canada, perhaps. Come and kind of swipe them out at the semi-finals. But as you say, I think anything short of the finals would be a disappointment, and perhaps even anything short of winning it. Certainly for their demanding fans, that's what they'll be expecting. Do you see any of the? Sorry, do you want to say something?
I think we're going to ask each other the same question, so I will now pose it to you. Okay. What do you think would be an achievement for the other three teams in the group, or whichever one happens to join Mexico in the next round.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, whether any of these teams will get past the quarterfinal. And to be honest, I don't really see any of the bottom three teams getting past the quarterfinals here. I think the team that makes it second, maybe apart from El Salvador, will feel good about it. El Salvador might just kind of expect it a bit more than the other two. But even El Salvador, I don't really see getting past the quarterfinals. How about you?
Yeah, I would agree. I would see the quarterfinals realistically being kind of the limit for any of the bottom three, and I think anything beyond that would not only be a success but a bit of a shock or a bit of a surprise. Especially finishing second in the group, they're going to place another group winner, another first place team, so they would have to pull a pretty big upset, I think, to get beyond that.
Yeah, well, you never know. I mean, there are always surprises, so I'm always a bit tentative with these predictions. But I think based on what we've seen in their history and recent performance, this is kind of what we can expect. And it's always kind of pleasant when things go against expectations too.
Absolutely. I never mind looking a fool when my predictions don't come true, when there's a great underdog story or a great surprise in the works.
That's a great way to end the podcast. Thanks so much for doing the podcast with me, Connor. That was a lot of fun to talk about Group A.
Right. I will see you next time for Group B.
You betcha. Bye-bye.
Bye.